Single dad restored a 1963 Corvette in 9 hours, then a female CEO offered him her entire $8 million garage. Part 1. The 1963 Corvette looked like it had been forgotten by the world. It sat beneath a thick gray cover in the darkest corner of an enormous private garage, surrounded by millions of dollars worth of luxury vehicles. While the other cars gleamed under bright showroom lights, the old Corvette looked completely out of place. Its tires were flat, rust covered parts of the body. The windshield was cracked. The engine had not run in more than 20 years. Anyone else would have called it a useless wreck. But Daniel Carter didn't. The moment the 40-year-old single father pulled the cover away, his eyes changed. He didn't see rust. He didn't see broken parts. He saw potential. "She's beautiful," Daniel whispered. The wealthy woman standing behind him almost laughed. Her name was Victoria Reynolds, a 42-year-old CEO who had built a technology empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She was famous for her business success, her sharp personality, and her incredible collection of classic automobiles. But this Corvette had become a problem. Victoria had purchased it at an exclusive auction, believing it would become the centerpiece of her collection. Instead, every mechanic she hired gave her the same answer. The car was too far gone. Restoration would take months, maybe even a year, and the cost could exceed $100,000. Daniel had been recommended by a friend of a friend. He wasn't famous. He didn't own a fancy repair shop. He didn't even drive an expensive car. He was simply a single father who had spent most of his life repairing vehicles. Victoria folded her arms. "Can you fix it?" Daniel slowly walked around the Corvette. He opened the hood. He examined the engine. He checked the frame. He looked underneath the car. Then he stood up. "Yes." Victoria stared at him. "How long?" Daniel looked at the clock on the wall. 9 hours. Silence filled the garage. One of Victoria's assistants actually laughed. 9 hours. Daniel didn't react. Victoria stepped closer. "My mechanics said 3 months." Daniel nodded. "Then they can take 3 months. And you?" 9 hours. Victoria narrowed her eyes. "You're very confident." Daniel smiled slightly. "I'm not confident. I'm familiar." That answer caught her attention. Daniel explained that he had been repairing cars since he was a teenager. His father had been a mechanic who taught him everything he knew. After his father died, Daniel continued learning on his own. He had restored engines in abandoned barns, rebuilt transmissions in rented garages, and repaired cars for people who couldn't afford to buy new ones. Then life had changed. Daniel became a single father. His daughter, Emma, was now 10 years old, and she was the most important person in his world. After losing his job at a local repair shop, Daniel had struggled to find steady work. Bills were piling up, and he had started taking small repair jobs wherever he could. But he never complained in front of Emma. He wanted her to believe that no matter how difficult life became, there was always a way forward. Now, standing beside the ruined Corvette, Daniel saw an opportunity. He rolled up his sleeves. "Let's get started." For the next 9 hours, Daniel worked like a man possessed. He removed damaged components, cleaned decades of dirt from the engine, repaired the fuel system, rebuilt the brakes, replaced damaged wiring. He worked so quickly that Victoria's professional mechanics could barely keep up with him. Emma watched from a nearby chair. "Are you really going to make it run, Dad?" Daniel glanced at her. "I told you I would." By the 5th hour, the Corvette was beginning to look alive. By the 7th hour, Daniel turned the key. The engine coughed. Everyone froze. Daniel tried again. This time, the engine roared. The sound echoed through the enormous garage. Victoria's eyes widened. The impossible had happened. The dead Corvette was alive. Daniel stepped away from the driver's seat and wiped his hands on a rag. 9 hours, he said quietly. Victoria stared at him. Then she looked at the Corvette. Then back at Daniel. "Who are you?" Daniel smiled. "Just a dad who knows how to fix cars." Victoria shook her head. "No." Her voice became serious. "You're much more than that." She turned toward the massive collection of cars surrounding them. Ferraris, Porsches, Lamborghinis, classic Corvettes, rare muscle cars. The collection was estimated to be worth nearly $8 million. Victoria looked back at Daniel. "I have an offer for you." Daniel frowned. "What kind of offer?" Victoria smiled. "One that could change your life." Daniel had no idea that within minutes, the woman who had hired him to repair one forgotten Corvette would offer him something worth more than money. She was about to offer him control of her entire $8 million garage. And Daniel's answer would change both of their lives forever. Part 2. Daniel stood completely still. For a moment, he thought he had misunderstood Victoria. "Sorry," he said. "What did you just say?" Victoria smiled. "I said I want you to run my entire collection." Daniel looked around the enormous garage. There were more than 30 vehicles inside. Some were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Others were priceless classics that collectors would spend years searching for. Daniel pointed toward the cars. "All of this, all of it." Daniel shook his head. "Victoria, I'm a mechanic. I'm not a businessman. That's exactly why I chose you." Daniel frowned. Victoria walked toward the restored 1963 Corvette. "When I bought this car, I was told it was impossible to restore. Every expert I hired gave me a list of reasons why it couldn't be done." She placed her hand gently on the Corvette's polished hood. "Then you came here and didn't give me a single excuse." Daniel remained silent. Victoria continued. "You looked at a broken machine and saw something worth saving. That's the kind of person I need." Daniel glanced at his daughter. Emma was standing beside him with a huge smile. "Dad, you should do it." Daniel laughed softly. "Emma, it's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because people like us don't just walk into an $8 million garage and take over." Victoria heard him. "Why not?" Daniel looked at her. Victoria's expression had suddenly become serious. "Daniel, do you know how many people I have hired who knew how to make money but didn't know how to build anything?" Daniel said nothing. "I've had managers who could calculate profits down to the last cent. I've had mechanics with impressive certificates. I've had collectors who knew every model number ever produced." She looked directly into his eyes. "But none of them cared about the cars." Daniel looked at the Corvette. Victoria continued. "You care." For the first time, Daniel didn't know what to say. His entire life, people had told him that he wasn't successful. His former coworkers had laughed when he lost his job. His landlord had threatened him when he fell behind on rent. Even some of his relatives had told him to stop dreaming and find a real career. Now a billionaire CEO was standing in front of him, telling him that his greatest strength was the very thing everyone else had overlooked. Daniel swallowed hard. "What exactly are you offering?" Victoria took a folder from her. "Assistant, full-time position, executive salary, complete authority over restoration projects. A percentage of the profits from cars you restore and sell." Daniel's eyes widened. "And the garage?" Victoria smiled. "You'll manage it." Daniel stared at the folder. "This is too much." "No." Victoria shook her head. "It's not enough." Daniel looked confused. Victoria opened the folder. "There is one more condition." Daniel's expression changed. "What condition?" Victoria looked toward Emma. "Your daughter." Daniel immediately became protective. "What about her?" "She comes with you." Daniel blinked. Victoria quickly clarified. "I mean she can be here after school. There is a private office, a lounge, and a library upstairs. I want this place to become a second home for both of you." Daniel was speechless. Victoria continued. "I know what it's like to grow up without having someone believe in you." Her voice became softer. "I don't want your daughter to ever feel that way." Daniel looked down. Emma reached for her father's hand. For years, Daniel had been fighting to give his daughter a better life. Now, unexpectedly, someone was offering him the opportunity he had never imagined. But Daniel still hesitated. "Why me?" Victoria didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked toward the back of the garage. There, beneath a dusty cover, sat another classic car. She pulled the cover away. Daniel's eyes widened. It was a rare 1967 Shelby Cobra. Victoria looked at him. "Because I want to know what you can do with that." Daniel smiled. For the first time in years, he felt something he had almost forgotten. "Hope." He looked at Emma. She squeezed his hand. "Do it, Dad." Daniel turned toward Victoria. "All right." Victoria smiled. "Welcome to the Reynolds collection." But neither of them knew that the real challenge was only beginning. Because the next morning, a mysterious phone call would reveal that someone wanted Victoria's entire collection destroyed. And Daniel would soon discover that restoring the cars was going to be the easiest part of his new job. Part 3. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the garage before sunrise. He had barely slept. The offer from Victoria had changed everything. For the first time in years, he wasn't worried about whether he could pay next month's bills. He wasn't thinking about how many repair jobs he needed to complete before Emma's school expenses were due. He had a real opportunity. But something felt wrong. When Daniel opened the garage door, he immediately noticed that one of the security lights was broken. He stopped. The garage had been heavily secured. There were cameras everywhere. Nobody should have been able to enter without being noticed. Daniel walked inside. Everything appeared normal. Then he saw the message. It was written on a small piece of paper and placed directly on the hood of the restored 1963 Corvette. "You don't belong here. Walk away." Daniel stared at it. His first thought was to call Victoria. Before he could reach for his phone, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned quickly. It was Victoria. She looked at the note. Her face immediately changed. "You got one too." Daniel frowned. "Two." Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out another piece of paper. It carried the same message. Daniel looked at her. "How long has this been happening?" Victoria hesitated. 3 weeks. Daniel's expression hardened. "And you didn't tell me." "I didn't want to involve you." Daniel pointed toward the garage. "Victoria, I'm responsible for this place now. If someone is threatening your collection, I need to know." Victoria sighed. She finally told him the truth. For months, she had been negotiating to purchase a historic automotive company. The company owned several rare vehicles and valuable patents. One of her competitors wanted the deal to fail. But Victoria had refused to back down. Now someone was trying to intimidate her. Daniel looked around the garage. "Do you know who it is?" "No." "Then we find out." Victoria stared at him. "You just started working here yesterday." Daniel smiled. "I'm a single dad. I'm used to dealing with problems I didn't ask for." Despite the tension, Victoria laughed. But the smile disappeared when they heard a loud crash. Both of them turned. A side window had shattered. Daniel immediately grabbed Victoria's arm and pulled her behind a concrete pillar. Another sound followed. A rock had been thrown through the window. Attached to it was another note. Victoria picked it up with trembling hands. This time, there were only 4 words. "The cars will burn." Daniel's face became serious. He immediately checked the security system. Someone had disabled 2 cameras during the night. Whoever was doing this knew the garage. And they knew exactly what they were targeting. Daniel spent the next several hours reviewing security footage and inspecting every entrance. Finally, he discovered something. A vehicle had been parked near the garage shortly before the security cameras went offline. Daniel recognized the license plate. It belonged to a former employee of Victoria's. Victoria immediately called the police. The former employee was questioned, but there wasn't enough evidence to arrest him. That night, Daniel refused to leave. Victoria insisted that he go home. "You have a daughter waiting for you." Daniel looked at Emma, who had come to the garage after school. "That's exactly why I'm staying." Victoria looked at him. Daniel continued. "I spent years trying to build a safe life for my daughter. I'm not going to let anyone destroy it now." Victoria was silent. Something changed between them in that moment. She had hired Daniel because he could restore cars. But now she realized he was protecting something much more valuable. The next morning, Daniel made a decision. He would finish the restoration of the 1967 Shelby Cobra. And he would do it in record time. For the next several days, Daniel worked relentlessly. Victoria watched him transform the vehicle. Piece by piece, the forgotten Shelby came back to life. When Daniel finally started the engine, the deep roar echoed throughout the garage. Victoria smiled. "You did it again." Daniel looked at her. "No." He shook his head. "We did." Victoria's expression softened. Then she handed Daniel a set of keys. "What are these?" "The garage." Daniel stared at her. Victoria smiled. "I told you I was offering you a job. I changed my mind." She pointed toward the entire collection. "This isn't just a job anymore." Daniel looked confused. Victoria continued. "I want you to become my partner." Daniel couldn't speak. Victoria placed the keys in his hand. "The entire $8 million collection will be under our management. You will lead the restoration division. And I want you to build something of your own here." Daniel looked at Emma. His daughter was crying. Daniel finally understood. The 9-hour Corvette restoration hadn't just saved an old car. It had saved a family from losing hope. It had given a single father a second chance. And it had brought 2 people together who never expected to meet. Months later, the restored 1963 Corvette was displayed at the country's biggest classic car exhibition. Thousands of people gathered around it. The car won the top restoration award. When Daniel stepped onto the stage, the crowd applauded. But Daniel didn't look at the trophy. He looked at Emma. Then he looked at Victoria. Victoria smiled. Daniel finally understood that sometimes the greatest opportunities in life don't arrive when everything is going well. Sometimes they arrive when you're standing in front of something everyone else has already given up on. Just like that old Corvette. Just like Daniel. And just like the life he had almost stopped believing he deserved.